Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're going to stand in a kitchen where the ocean air sneaks through a cracked window. A saucepan ticks as it cools, and an argument unspools so fast you can hear the grammar fail. I'll keep my voice low, like I'm letting you listen from behind the pantry door. You'll notice the shine of a brochure, the sharp scent of citrus cleaner, and the exact second a promise turns into a threat. And here's a quick reality check. If you think love will always pick kindness over convenience, you might not survive the first time money asks for a vote. Vive, chúc khi bạn cảm thấy thoải mái, hãy dành chút thời gian để thích video và đăng ký, nhưng chỉ khi bạn thực sự thích những gì tôi làm ở đây. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Bây giờ hãy tắt đèn, có thể bắt quạt để có tiếng ồn nhẹ nhàng, và chúng ta hãy cùng nhau bắt đầu hành trình tối nay.
The brochure was the first red flag glossy enough to reflect the ceiling light back at itself. 7 nights in the Adriatic, it announced as if a sea could be bought in week-long increments. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, fanned it like a deck of winning cards. Premium suite, balcony, butler. It's on sale. She said sale the way an auctioneer says sold. It's $50,000, I said. I tried for gentle, but money makes even the softest voice sound like a door closing.
She leaned on the island manicured nail, tapping the price line as if a decimal might relocate under pressure. Margaret, you've been saying you want to see me and call in happy, she said. This is us being happy. You can afford it.
Old age wisdom arrived with its 2 cents, an exact change. People say, I can't about the gym and you can about your money. Call in. My son hovered near the fridge trying to pour sparkling water without choosing a side. Mom, he started, Vanessa's been planning this forever. It would mean a lot. I folded the brochure shut with one finger. I won't fund a $50,000 cruise. I paused, letting the sentence find its weight on the counter between us. Not now. Not like this. Vanessa's smile left the room first. Excuse me? I said no. I replied. I'm happy to help with smaller things, things that build something. But this is... I searched for a word that wasn't excess, not my responsibility. For a heartbeat, the kitchen was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faraway thrum of a leaf blower. Quirky fact, in an argument, appliances keep their own tempo. They never speed up for drama. Joke 1, my dishwasher has seen more plot twists than a soap opera. Vanessa's eyes went flat, like someone turned the dimmer down behind them. Then find a new place to live. She spat loud enough to jar the spoon in the sink. If you won't contribute, you can contribute your absence. The slap came the way summer storms do heat then light. Not hard enough to topple me, just accurate enough to rearrange my balance. Skin stung, but the part of me that counted time kept working. I braced a hand on the counter, surprised by how easy it was to stay upright when the world decided not to be. Vanessa Collins said panic, finally finding him. He set the glass down so fast it chimed water, beating a nervous ring on the wood. Don't. Too late. Words had already left their fingerprints. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I reached for a paper towel and wiped the countertop like etiquette demanded a gesture. You've made your position clear, I said. Academic debate phrase floated up like a lifeline non-negotiable demand structure. Sometimes inserting a precise term into a mess is the only disinfectant you have. Vanessa folded her arms. You live here rent-free. We cook for you, we include you, and you sit here holding on to money you don't even use. I pay the property taxes, I said. The house is mine, and you know that. I asked you to stay when your lease ended, as guests, not as landlords. She laughed, a short, bright sound with no humor in it. A house isn't a life, Margaret. Cash is. Colin tried again, softer. We could meet in the middle. Maybe you cover the deposit, and we handle the rest. I'm not investing in a trip I would never take, I said. I straightened the sting in my cheek, settling into a line I'd cross or respect. And I won't be slapped in my own kitchen. Silence did the math none of us wanted. I walked to the sink, ran cool water, and pressed the back of my hand to my face. I watched the faucet stream as if it could rinse the air. Old age wisdom sent a postscript, no is a complete sentence. The comma after it is where you breathe. Fine, Vanessa said, voice going bright again, the way people make things sound festive when they're about to break them. Then find somewhere else to stay while we sort out our plans. We need space from your negativity. Colin's eyes begged me to rescue him from the sentence. I didn't. I'll leave tonight, I said. I keep a small bag ready because life still loves a fire drill. Joke 2, I'm the kind of woman who labels her chargers and her fears. Vanessa blinked, surprised that the lever she'd pulled had a trapdoor under her too. Good, she said, recovering fast. Take your time. We'll be making decisions. That I said is clear. I went to my room. It still smelled like lavender sachets and book pages. On the dresser, the photo of Colin at age 10, missing tooth hand full of sea glass, looked impossibly far from the man who couldn't meet my eyes 10 minutes ago. I packed like a person who has rehearsed self-respect, 3 days of clothes, toiletries, the folder of essential documents, my small carved wooden box with 2 rings and a locket, my address book, my reading glasses, my portable comb. Quirky fact, folding a sweater along the seams makes it take up less space and more resolve. When I zipped the bag, I sat on the bed for a full minute. The house talked to itself the way houses do, settling beams, a distant neighbor slamming a car door. I listened, memorizing the tone. Homes have moods, and this one had shifted from welcome to weather alert. I texted Helen, my oldest friend, who keeps a spare key under a blue pot no one ever thinks to lift. Can I borrow your seaside quiet for a night or two? She replied before my thumb finished hovering. You can have the quiet and the noise. Come. I left a note on the kitchen table for Colin. I'm safe. I'm staying with Helen. We'll talk soon without an audience. Mom. I took a photo of the note with the timestamp because old habits from complicated seasons die hard. Academic debate phrase, contemporaneous corroboration. At the door, I paused. Vanessa was in the living room already on a call, voice honeyed. We're planning the cruise, she cooed. Yes, the big suite. I knew we'd get there. I stepped onto the porch. Dusk had laced itself into the trees in that tender way it does when the sky wants you to forgive it for leaving. The air tasted like citrus and ocean, both the kind of evening that tries to make everything cinematic. The rideshare pulled up tires, humming against the curb. The driver glanced at the bag. Airport. Not yet, I said. Just the harbor road. We drove with the windows cracked salt curling through the car like a promise I didn't owe anyone. I watched the town pass the bait shop that sells coffee. No one drinks the bookstore with a handwritten sign that reads, Yes, we have the book you're thinking of. My cheek cooled and the pulse in my neck stopped editing my thoughts. Helen's cottage crouched 2 blocks from the water, a small square of light, on a street that smelled like ropes and diesel and brine. She opened the door before I knocked, the kind of friend who swears she heard your footsteps from 3 houses away. Tea on, she said, then saw my face and switched to ice first. At her kitchen table, I let the story out in clean sentences, stripped of anything I didn't want to keep. She didn't gasp. She didn't fuss. She put the ice on my cheek and pushed a pad of paper toward me. Write the time it happened, she said, practical as tide charts. Start a log. If a storm is coming, you'll want dates, not adjectives. We sip tea with lemon because it makes you sit up straighter. The cottage walls held the sound the way good rooms do, no echo, no judgment, just room, just. 50,000, Helen murmured, more arithmetic than outrage. I won't buy myself silence, I said. Not at that price, not at any. She nodded, and I felt the day settle into 2 neat stacks, what had been done to me and what I would do next. I'll sleep in the back room, I said. Tomorrow I'll go get my papers out of the house and check my accounts. I want to see if anyone's drawn lines with my pen. Take me with you, she replied, and take a folder. People behave better around tabs. Quirky fact, a labeled divider can do what a locked door sometimes can't. It makes strangers think twice. Jokba office supplies, the quiet heroes of boundary setting. That night, the sea talked in its sleep outside the window, and I let it. My phone buzzed only once. Colin. Are you okay? I typed. Yes. We'll talk when the house is empty of applause lines. He sent back a single heart that looked like it was sorry for showing up late. I slept the way you do when your cheek still remembers a hand, but your spine remembers a line. Morning would ask for lists and copies and passwords. Tonight asked only this. Keep the promise I made to myself standing in that kitchen that my no would stay said, and my leaving would be a map, not a retreat. The morning came with that briny snap you only get near the coast, cool air that wakes you before your coffee does. Old age wisdom, when your next steps feel messy, start the day with something simple you can finish, like making the bed or boiling an egg. I did both before Helen even shuffled in, wearing her robe patterned with seashells. She set 2 mugs on the table. We go today, she said. You get your papers, your valuables, and whatever dignity they didn't manage to scratch. We made a checklist on the back of an envelope: passport, birth certificate, banking records, the property deed, and the carved wooden box I'd tucked in my dresser drawer for decades. Helen also added photo evidence in her steady script. If something looks off, document it. Dates and angles, she said. You want a record that's harder to argue with than memory. Quirky fact photos may not capture smell, but they can freeze a lie in perfect lighting. Joke one Instagram wishes it had that power. By 10 a.m., we were in Helen's little hatchback heading toward my house. My heart thumped with that same mix of dread and determination you feel before walking into a meeting you didn't schedule. Colin's car wasn't in the driveway good. Vanessa's was, of course, gleaming, like it had just been detailed. I let myself in with my key, the familiar click sounding sharper than I remembered. Inside the kitchen was spotless, unnervingly so. The brochure from the cruise lay on the counter now with a sticky note, call to confirm upgrade. My name was scrawled at the bottom in Vanessa's looping hand. Academic debate phrase flared in my mind: presumptive consent. The assumption that my eventual yes was just a matter of timing. I went straight to my room. Helen at my heels. My dresser drawers were neat, too neat. The wooden box was still there, but one of my rings had been moved from its slot. Photograph it, Helen murmured. I did timestamp and all. The folder with my financial records was in the closet, but lighter than it should have been. I flipped through, missing the last 2 months of bank statements. I didn't keep originals at home, but the printed copies were gone. That meant someone had gone looking. Quirky fact thieves of information often tidy up after themselves, thinking you won't notice what's missing if the space looks better. Joke 2, it's like robbing a fridge but leaving it cleaner. We moved to the small desk in the corner. My checkbook was there, but one blank check was missing. My stomach clenched in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. I photographed the checkbook, then the empty slot. Helen opened the mail pile on the counter. Margaret, this one's for you. It was a bank notice unopened. Inside an alert about a large withdrawal made 2 days earlier. $7,500. My account number, my name. The signature line on the copy they'd enclosed was an awkward imitation of mine, close enough to fool someone in a hurry. I sat down hard. She's already started, I said. Helen slid the notice into my folder. Then we start faster. We gathered the rest: passport, deed, insurance documents, double-checking each item against our list. I locked the wooden box in my tote and zipped it shut. Before we left, I took a slow, deliberate look around the kitchen again. My tea tins were rearranged, A new bottle of champagne sat in the fridge. On the wall calendar next Saturday had a heart drawn around it with the words, Bon voyage. Walking out, I felt the air change lighter once the door closed behind me. Helen locked it with my key and handed it back like she was passing me a baton in a race neither of us had wanted to run. In the car, she glanced over. Bank first. Bank first, I said. Because the thing about storms is you can't stop the wind, but you can board the windows before it gets worse. The bank had that chilled, conditioned air that makes every decision feel both urgent and irreversible. Old age wisdom, if you're going to do hard things, do them in a chair with armrests and a cup of water nearby. Helen and I went straight to the desk of a senior teller I knew by name, Patricia, the sort of woman who remembers your birthday and your PIN better than you do. I laid the withdrawal notice in front of her. That's not my signature, I said. And that's not my authorization. She adjusted her glasses, looked from the paper to me, and then back again. Margaret, this is serious. We'll need to file a fraud report immediately. She typed with the speed of someone used to emergencies in polite packaging. Quirky fact banks have an entire vocabulary for theft that avoids the word theft, unauthorized transaction, compromised account, discrepancy. Joke 1, because nothing says comfort like a euphemism. Within 20 minutes, she'd frozen the account, issued me a new number, and printed a full transaction history for the past 3 months. 2 other withdrawals stood out, $2,300 and $1,800, both marked as in-branch transactions at a location across town. That's not me, I said, circling them with the pen Patricia handed me. I don't even drive that far for groceries. Patricia's lips thinned. We can request the security footage for those days. Do you want me to add that to the report? Yes. And I want copies of everything for my records. Academic debate phrase drifted through contemporaneous documentation. If this turned legal, and it was heading that way, I wanted my paper trail laminated in facts. Helen tapped the folder. You'll also need a separate log for every contact about this time, date, name, and what was said. People behave better when they know they're in ink. Once we had the receipts, we went straight to the police station. The front desk officer listened carefully, then directed us to a detective in the financial crimes unit. Detective Alvarez was brisk but kind, the way you want someone to be when they're about to catalog your vulnerabilities. This could be the start of a pattern, she said after hearing the outline. We'll open a case request, those bank videos, and get a handwriting comparison. She handed me a case number and her card. If you find anything else missing, documents, valuables, call me. Don't wait. Quirky fact, police report paper is rough like recycled cardboard, but the weight of it in your hand feels heavier than metal. Joke 2, probably because it's stapled to your peace of mind. Back at Helen's, I spread everything across her dining table, bank printouts, the fraud report, my list of missing items. Seeing it all laid out like that made it real in a way words hadn't. This is bigger than a slap in the kitchen, Helen said quietly. I nodded. She's not just trying to get a cruise out of me. She's trying to take the wheel entirely. And that, I decided, was not going to happen, not while I could still draw a line in ink and have the paper to prove it. If there's one thing the sea teaches you, it's how to read wake lines. What's past leaves marks you can follow if you're patient. Old age wisdom. When betrayal feels abstract, turn it into a checklist. Paper doesn't gaslight you. So I made coffee strong enough to file its own report and began tracing the ripples. First destination, the travel agency stamped on the cruise brochure's back flap. Sea Bright Voyages, nestled between a candle shop and a realtor who smiles like he knows your credit score. Helen parked out front like a lawyer in a made-for-TV movie and said, "You do the talking, I'll do the remembering." Inside, bell chime diffused ocean scents and a framed picture of a cruise ship so glossy it could have tax deductions. A woman in coral lipstick introduced herself as Brianna. I set the brochure on the counter with 2 fingers as if it might bite. I'd like to confirm whether a reservation exists under my name, I said evenly. I slid my ID across. Margaret Doyle. She tapped keys, eyes moving left to right like she was reading my future. We don't have a final booking, but we do show a health suite under a household account created last week. Initials MDVD. Brianna glanced at me over the rim of her screen. There's a note. Awaiting wire confirmation. Upgrades pre-approved via vendor credit. Vendor credit. Quirky fact in finance, the word credit often means someone expects to be repaid with interest in dollars or deference. Joke one credit is just debt wearing cologne. I kept my tone clinical. What bank is the wire supposed to originate from? She hesitated, then turned the monitor slightly so I could see the routing number, prefix my banks. Not the new account Patricia had issued this morning. The old one? The frozen one? Good. At least the next wave would hit a wall. Could you email me the full notes and any documents attached to that household account? I asked, sliding over a card with the email I reserved for trouble. I need a paper trail for family logistics. Brianna nodded slowly, like she understood more than policy allowed her to say. I can send a summary. Her coral lips softened, and integrity discount applies if you do rebook with us later. When we stepped back onto the sidewalk, gulls heckled us from a lamppost. Helen squinted at my scribbles. Household account created last week, wire pending vendor credit, she read. That sounds like somebody shopped with your checkbook and your reputation.
Add it to the log, I said. Next stop, Lavash & Co.
The jeweler's door had that plush resistance you get when a place wants you to know entering is a privilege. The sales associate, a man with cufflinks shaped like tiny hourglasses, greeted us with a bow you could measure with a ruler. How may we delight you? By telling me whether a purchase was made using my name, I said. And by whom? I slid my ID again. No charges should exist, but here we are. He clicked around the interface of the very wealthy. I do see a preferred client profile established for you last Tuesday, he said, sponsored by an existing client, Vanessa Doyle. No purchase recorded, but there is a held item linked to a pro forma invoice. He printed it without being asked. We hold items for 10 days, then we call. The invoice had the kind of math that makes your throat dry. Deposit request, $800,000 balance due 30 days prior to sailing, complimentary private showing, tied to a charity partnership. Complimentary in quotes because the word was working overtime. Under notes, second traveler, benefits apply if sponsor attends in person. Academic debate phrase surfaced like a buoy reciprocity enforcement mechanism systems that make saying yes easier than saying no and more expensive to refuse the longer you wait. Who provided the sponsoring reference, I asked. Mrs. Doyle, he replied, meaning Vanessa, not me. She's a long-standing client. That tracked. Vanessa collects status the way some people collect fridge magnets. I requested a stamped copy, thanked him with the kind of smile that says, the thank you is for the evidence, not the service, and stepped into the late morning like it owed me sunlight. Back in the car, Helen tapped the steering wheel. So she didn't slap you just to win an argument, she said. She slapped you to push you through the gate she'd already opened. I nodded. And now we know who sold her the hinges. We weren't done. 2 more calls first to the tuxedo rental listed on a post-it I'd photographed from the kitchen calendar, Bon Voyage Heart, around Saturday. No record under Colin's name, but a courtesy hold under Vanessa's. Second to the city's mailbox rental hub because a 9-digit number had been doodled next to our address on the family whiteboard for a week, one of those numbers you feel in your teeth because it doesn't belong to anything you keep in a kitchen. The clerk confirmed a private mailbox opened 2 months ago, authorized users V. Doyle and household member M. No last name attached to that M. I felt the anger clean and cold because Miss M was not me. Quirky fact. People running small schemes always underestimate two things: how long paper keeps talking and how quickly a librarian-adjacent friend can speed read. Joke high, bring me your commas and your crimes. I file both alphabetically. We detoured to the post office. I set up a P.O. box in my name, only forwarded my mail, and added Helen as an authorized agent. The clerk slid 2 tiny keys across like she was deputizing us. The keys made a cheerful clink that translated to "Not today, pirates." "Lunch," Helen declared. "Even pirates need calories." We ate clam chowder that made me temporarily forgive the Atlantic for its moods. Over bowls, we drafted 3 polite but fortified emails. To Sea Bright Voyages, legal household account creation was unauthorized. Any wire attempts should be rejected. All holds tied to my initials revoked. Send complete audit log. To Lavache and Cope in compliance, rescind sponsor linkage. Freeze any orders referencing my name. Deliver all documents to my P.O. box. To our bank's fraud department, CC Detective Alvarez, add the account freeze, letter request surveillance pools, and notify them of travel agency and jeweler findings. Academic debate phrase for the table: multi-vector containment, cutting supply, severing optics, hardening endpoints. Helen raised a spoon in approval like it was a tiny, well-mannered sword. When the bowls were empty, she drummed her fingers. One more thread. "The neighbor," I said. "Mrs. Feldman. She sees everything from her front porch, as if the block pays her in gossip and begonias." We drove by. She was indeed on the porch with pruning shears shaped like judgment. "Margaret," she called before I opened the gate. "I was going to text you. Your daughter in love." She winked. An upgrade from law I couldn't endorse had a delivery last night. 2 big garment bags and a hat box. The courier asked for your signature, but she signed with permission. I told him your penmanship didn't limp like that. I loved her in that moment, the way you love a guard dog you don't have to feed. What time? After 7. And a silver SUV I didn't recognize picked her up around 9. Came back around 11 with shopping bags. She left the brochures in the recycling. Mrs. Feldman handed me a glossy scrap she'd rescued, an invitation to a Bon Voyage champagne preview. Date circled. My kitchen calendar's heart date. We thanked her with the kind of gratitude that carries implicit subpoenas. Helen wrote down the times. I photographed the scrap and slid it into a sleeve. In the car, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The picture was no longer a fog, it was a map. Back at the cottage, I arranged the day's artifacts on the table like an exhibit. Travel notes, invoice, mailbox confirmation, neighbor statement, and the bank printouts. I filed everything under tabs that made sense to a future me who might be tired. Bank, travel, jeweler, mail, witness. Quirky fact-naming folders after the headache they prevent is better than naming them after the headache they cause. Jokepa folder 7. Nope, not today. I called Detective Alvarez, kept it to 5 minutes, hit the beats. She whistled softly when I reached household account. "You're building me a prosecutable timeline," she said. "Keep receipts and don't confront her directly. If she calls, let it go to voicemail." An hour later, my phone lit up anyway, Colin. I answered. His voice was low, threaded with apology. "Mom, did you freeze the account? Vanessa says the wire bounced and she looks ridiculous." I froze my account because $7,500 left without my consent, I said. Also because a travel agency held a suite under my name. Also because a jeweler thinks I sponsored myself. A stunned breath. I didn't know. "I believe you," I said. And I did. But believing you doesn't undo the facts. I'm not going to shout. I'm not going to negotiate. I filed a fraud report. I've moved my mail. Tomorrow, I'm meeting an attorney. He was quiet for a long moment. "Can I come?" he asked, small, like a boy asking if the storm is really over. "Yes," I said, "just you." After we hung up, Helen put a fresh pot of tea on the way some people set trophies on mantles. Tomorrow, she said, we chart the legal course. I wrote the day's last line in my notebook. Traces followed. Trail found, tide turning. Then I shut the cover, not as an ending, but as a courtesy to the weary part of me that deserved a night without fluorescent lights. The ocean breathed outside like a metronome for blood pressure. Somewhere Vanessa was learning that paper has a temper when mishandled. And me, I had tabs, a case number, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing the wake is finally behind the boat. The next morning, Helen and I walked into the office of Leonard Price, recommended by Detective Alvarez, as someone who didn't just practice elder financial law, but sharpened it. Old age wisdom. If you're hiring a lawyer, look for the one whose reception area feels more like a war room than a waiting room. Leonard's had wall-to-wall file cabinets and a coffee pot that looked like it never went cold. He shook my hand firmly. Margaret, I've read the brief Alvarez sent. You've done half my job already. I keep receipts, I said, sliding the accordion folder onto his desk. In every sense. Leonard flipped through the tabs, bank travel, jeweler, mail witness, making small, approving noises. This is meticulous. We're going to file for an emergency protective order on your assets, plus exclusive possession of your property. If Vanessa's living there, she'll be legally removed until we sort ownership. Quirky fact in legal terms, exclusive possession means the door locks for you and only you, and yes, it's as satisfying as it sounds. Joke won also a good name for a wine brand that pairs well with peace of mind. He drafted the petition as we spoke, asking for details like exact dates, amounts, and every instance of unauthorized use of my name. Academic debate phrase on his legal pattern of coercive financial control, he explained it was stronger than citing isolated incidents. Courts see a pattern, they act faster.
While he typed, Helen and I sat quietly, the clack of keys like a steady drumbeat. Finally, Leonard printed a thick sheaf of papers and slid them across. Sign here, here, and here. We'll get this in front of a judge this afternoon. If it's approved, Vanessa will have 24 hours to vacate.
I signed without my hand, shaking a small victory considering 2 days ago I'd been packing under duress. By lunch, Leonard called. Order signed, effective immediately. He'd also requested a temporary freeze on all joint accounts Colin and Vanessa held to prevent her from moving assets in anticipation of the eviction. Quirky fact, nothing makes a schemer sweat like a surprise blockade on their favorite river. Joke 2, and I've just built a dam with my signature. We celebrated with tuna melts at the cafe across from the courthouse. Helen raised her coffee mug. To ink and iron doors. To being the only one with a key, I replied. Back at the cottage, I started making a list for tomorrow police escort to the house change of locks inventory of every room. I wanted to walk in with my eyes open and a notepad ready because this time my homecoming wouldn't be quiet, it would be documented. The next morning smelled like salt and possibility, old age wisdom. If you're about to reclaim something that's yours, eat breakfast first. Victories run smoother on a full stomach. Helen scrambled eggs while I packed a fresh notebook, 2 pens, my phone charger, and a folder labeled Re-Entry. Leonard had arranged for 2 officers to meet us at the house. They were waiting in the driveway when we pulled up, cruiser idling, the autumn sun glinting off the hood. Officer Ramirez greeted me with a nod. "We'll walk through with you." She's been served and had time to leave. The front door felt heavier than I remembered, like it had been absorbing weeks of someone else's will. Inside, the air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and perfume Vanessa's signature mix, sweet enough to hide the vinegar underneath. We started in the living room. My eyes went straight to the bookshelf. 2 framed family photos were missing, both of Colin and me on past trips. I jotted photos, removed, and took a picture of the gaps on the shelf. Quirky fact, an empty space in a frame lineup can speak louder than the frames that remain. Joke 1, like missing teeth in a smile, you notice right away. In the kitchen drawers were oddly organized, too neat, too foreign. The note from Bon Voyage Champagne preview was gone from the fridge, but a faint square of tape residue marked where it had been. I documented that too. Even absence is evidence. Upstairs, the closet in the guest room was half-empty, garment bags gone. The bedspread I'd bought years ago for that room was missing entirely. Helen murmured. She packed for more than a weekend. Academic debate phrase for my notes: anticipatory relocation. People who think they're not coming back often leave in a way that proves it. In my own bedroom, the wooden box was still locked, but a faint scratch on the latch told me someone had tried to open it. I photographed it from 3 angles, timestamp clearly visible. Officer Ramirez kept a steady presence, jotting his own notes for the police record. "You'll want to change the locks today," he said. "I have a locksmith coming in an hour," I replied. Planning ahead felt like muscle memory now. We moved to the small desk where I keep my checkbooks. One had been moved likely by Vanessa during her earlier foray. I opened it, no new missing checks, but I wrote down the sequence numbers just in case. Quirky fact: people underestimate how much damage a single blank check can do. It's like leaving one loaded chamber in a revolver. Joke 2, I prefer my safes without suspense plots. By the time we finished the walkthrough, my notebook was a tidy column of losses, changes, and to-dos. The officer signed off on the inventory, noting no individuals present, and occupant resumed possession without incident. When the locksmith arrived, Helen and I stood on the porch while he swapped out every lock front and back, even the shed. The sound of the drill biting into old hardware felt like the door itself was exhaling. Once he left, I sat at my kitchen table, pen in hand, and added the day's last line to my log home: re-secured. Atmosphere lighter. Then I closed the notebook, not to end the work, but to mark the start of living in a space that answered only to me. The first night back in my house, I slept like someone who'd just dropped 100 pounds of invisible weight. Old age, wisdom, security isn't just a lock on the door, it's knowing no one else has a key in their pocket. Morning light spilled across the kitchen counter, catching on the edge of my notebook. I poured coffee, opened it, and started the day's plan call. The insurance company: update my attorney, change all online passwords, and check every account for unauthorized activity. Helen came by mid-morning with a paper bag of croissants. "Fuel for the siege," she said, setting them down like ammunition. "And I brought this." From her tote, she pulled a small black device, a motion sensor camera. "We'll put it in the entryway, just in case she thinks about coming back for round 2. Quirky fact: most trespassers hate being recorded more than being caught. Joke 1: vanity often trips faster than fear. After securing the camera, I called my insurance agent, Mrs. Whitcomb. She listened carefully as I detailed the missing items and suspicious withdrawals. "We'll file a claim for the tangible losses," she said, "and note the attempted access to your valuables. Keep those photos you took, they're worth more than your description alone." Academic debate phrase: evidentiary preservation for concurrent claims. Leonard had already drilled it into me. Everything I did now served both the legal and financial fronts. By afternoon, Leonard called with an update. "We've confirmed video footage from the bank branch where those in-person withdrawals happened," he said. "Detective Alvarez is reviewing it, but early word is it's not you and it's not your son." His tone implied there was only one other likely candidate. Later, I walked the perimeter of my home, noting every gate latch, window lock, and outdoor light. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Quirky fact: a well-lit yard is a better deterrent than a "beware of dog" sign, unless your dog actually bites in, which case you're just telling people where the teeth are. Joke 2: I've got motion lights, no teeth required. That night, I made a simple dinner: grilled fish, lemon, steamed vegetables, and ate it in the quiet hum of my own kitchen. No performance, no audience, no undercurrent of someone else's agenda, just peace plated. Before bed, I wrote my final note of the day: the house feels like mine again. And so do I. 2 days later, Leonard called with the kind of calm that means something big is about to break. "Margaret, we've got Vanessa on camera at the bank counter making those withdrawals. Alvarez is moving to add criminal charges to the case."
Old age wisdom. When a truth you've suspected becomes a fact on record, it's like a puzzle piece snapping into place, satisfying but also a little infuriating that it took this long.
I met Leonard at his office to review the footage. There she was, Vanessa in a designer coat, smiling like she was signing for a bouquet instead of my money. The timestamp matched the withdrawals to the minute.
Quirky fact. People committing fraud often behave like they're doing something entirely legitimate. It's the performance that makes them bold. Joke 1 confidence may sell cars, but it also signs stolen checks.
Leonard had already filed an amended complaint, now including theft, fraud, and unauthorized use of identity. "This strengthens our request for restitution," he said, "and it'll make the eviction order ironclad if she tries to contest it." That afternoon, Detective Alvarez stopped by my house with more news. They'd recovered the garment bags from a consignment shop across town. Inside one was my missing guest room quilt, still with the tag I'd sewn into the seam years ago. "That's not just evidence," Alvarez said. "That's proof she's liquidating your property for cash." Academic debate phrase for my law conversion of personal property. A tidy little legal phrase for selling what's not yours. Helen and I spent the evening securing the recovered items back where they belonged. The quilt smelled faintly of someone else's detergent, but it was mine again.
Quirky fact. Reclaiming something stolen is like finding a note you wrote to yourself years ago. You remember exactly who you were when you put it there. Joke 2, and sometimes you wish you could send a follow-up note saying, "Hide it better next time." Before bed, I added one more line to my notebook: evidence grows. The tide's in my favor now. By the end of the week, the legal tide had turned into a current strong enough to carry me forward without paddling. Leonard called on Friday morning. The judge scheduled a hearing for full restitution and a permanent restraining order. You'll want to be there in person. Old age wisdom. When the system finally works in your favor, show up. Not just for yourself, but so the record shows your face beside your name. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish, neutral scents for a place where lives tilt on signatures. Vanessa sat 2 rows ahead with her attorney glancing back at me once, then quickly away. Colin was on my side of the aisle, jaw set, hands folded tightly in his lap. The evidence spoke louder than any of us bank footage, forged signatures. The consignment shop receipt, my documented inventory. Academic debate phrase on Leonard's closing statement established an ongoing pattern of coercive and fraudulent behavior. When the judge read the order: full restitution of the stolen funds, a ban on accessing my accounts, and a permanent order barring her from my home, Vanessa's shoulders slumped just slightly. No dramatics, no outburst. Just the quiet realization that the locks, both legal and literal, had clicked. Quirky fact, sometimes the most satisfying justice is the kind that ends in silence, not spectacle. Joke 1, if only TV dramas knew how powerful a closed mouth can be. Outside, Colin apologized again. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "You see it now," I told him. "And now you know where the lines are." That evening back home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the front window. The motion sensor camera's light blinked softly in the corner, a quiet sentry. I wrote my last note of the day: the locks are mine, the law is mine, and the peace entirely mine. The days after the hearing settled into a new rhythm, the kind that doesn't ask permission before it starts. Old age wisdom routine is freedom wearing comfortable shoes. I woke without the old startle-made coffee that tasted like a good decision, and opened the curtains to let in a morning I didn't have to share with anyone's agenda. The camera's tiny blue light in the entryway blinked its quiet yes. The locks held their side of the bargain.
Colin came by every Tuesday. At first, our conversations tiptoed, then they learned to walk. He offered to repaint the guest room where the quilt had been taken, and I said yes, not because paint fixes betrayal, but because fresh color tells the room who it belongs to now. We chose a sea glass green. When the brush hit the wall, I swear the house stood up a little straighter. Quirky fact paint has a smell that makes even old rooms feel like they've rehearsed hope. Joke 1, no candle has ever beaten New Beginnings semi-gloss. The mailbox keys on my ring felt like punctuation marks periods where commas used to be. I kept my binder closed, not because I needed it daily, but because it reminded me that paper can be a friend if you let it. Leonard sent periodic updates, restitution checks, arriving in pieces. A final letter from the jeweler confirming every hold linked to my name had been scrubbed. Detective Alvarez dropped a short note, case closed on our end. You did everything right. I tucked it under the elastic band inside the binder like a postcard from Sanity. But life refused to be only legal and domestic. The ocean kept talking out front, and I realized I'd been living beside a map I hadn't opened in years. The cruelty of that cruise brochure wasn't the price. It was the lie that travel had to pass through someone else's wallet to be real. So I started small. A day ferry to the island a few miles out. Then a 2-night stay at a bed and breakfast where the owner still writes receipts by hand. I learned the ferry schedule by heart and the cafe's slow hours. I learned my own pace again. At Helen's suggestion, because friends who rescue you often keep nudging you toward your future, I put a flyer on the library bulletin board. Coastal Wanderers, low drama day trips for grown-ups. Underneath smaller, bring your own sandwich. We'll supply the laughs. Academic debate phrase a subtitle in my head. Collective autonomy in micro itineraries, a fancy way of saying we decide where we go, how we pay, and when we stop for ice cream. The first Saturday, 5 people showed up: a widower who used to be a park ranger, 2 sisters who finish each other's sentences like they're sharing one brain on layaway, a retired nurse who believes every problem can be softened by a thermos, and Helen, of course, with her clipboard and the necessary bossiness of a benevolent pirate. We took a bus to a lighthouse that's been resisting wind since before any of us could walk. On the way, we swapped stories with the kind of brevity that comes from learning you don't need to sell your past to get company in the present. We made rules as we went. Rule 1, nobody carries anybody else's guilt. Rule 2, we take turns picking destinations, and nobody apologizes for choosing boring things. Rule 3, photos are optional, memories are not. Joke high, we did institute a 4th rule about not judging anyone's snack choices. I will not be shamed for my allegiance to peanut butter crackers. News travels in small towns faster than seagulls find French fries. By our 3rd outing, a dozen people came. By the 5th, the community center offered us a room for planning nights. I built us a shared binder tabs labeled transit tickets, lunch spots, rain plans, access needs, and showed folks how to book online without inviting wolves. We practiced spotting the difference between a legitimate discount and a "we'll bill your future joy with interest." A surprising number of us had nearly been guilted into something shiny by someone else's vision. It turns out, no thanks is a skill you can learn together.
There were setbacks, there always are. One windy Wednesday, our ferry canceled, and the group turned toward me with that look people use for leaders they didn't mean to elect. I took a breath, remembered the kitchen slap that tried to make me smaller, and said, "We pivot." We rerouted to the Maritime Museum, bargained for a group rate, and ended up eating chowder on a bench while a docent told us how the lighthouse lens works. We applauded like we'd seen fireworks. Old age wisdom. If you treat Plan B like it was the plan all along, your heart will believe you. Joke 2. Most of my favorite memories were Plan C.
Sometimes I traveled alone. I took a train north and spent a day walking the boardwalk where my parents once argued about whether churros counted as dinner. They do. I sat on a bench and wrote a letter to the version of me who thought saying no would cost her a family. You kept the right people, I wrote. The ones who can love you without an invoice. I folded it into my notebook beside Alvarez's card. Colin came on 2 of our coastal wanderers trips. He was quiet on the bus, then talkative by the second landmark, like conversation bloomed only after his body figured out it wasn't bracing anymore. Once he apologized again for the way he'd hovered by the fridge that night for the weeks he'd let We Swallow Me. I told him the truth. Apology is a bridge, not a campsite. We crossed it together and kept walking. Vanessa became a lesson, not a ghost. If her name came up, it was in the tense of what we won't allow again. The restraining order lived in a folder in my desk, important and dusty, like a fire extinguisher you hope never to use. When the last restitution check arrived, I took Helen out for pie. We ate it in silence at first, spoons carving clean paths through meringue. Then we laughed full ridiculous laughter that made the server glance over and smile because joy like scandal is contagious. I bought a paper map of the coast and tacked it to the wall by my back door. Push pins marked where we'd been. A small bowl of color-coded flags waited for where we'd go. The map wasn't a boast, no glossy brochure promise. It was a conversation with my own feet. Sometimes I stood in front of it with my morning coffee and said, well. Some days the answer was a grocery run and a library book. Other days it was a bus I hadn't taken yet and a sandwich made the night before, because frugality is just freedom in a sensible outfit. On the anniversary of the day I left for Helen's cottage, we returned to the harbor and sat on the same weathered bench. The sea did its old steady thing. You know, Helen said we could actually do a cruise. On our terms, off-season, cheap cabin, balcony of attitude only.
I laughed.
I want the kind where the butler is just you in a sun hat reminding me to wear sunscreen. We can do that, she said, straight-faced. My rates are competitive, and you can pay in oysters. We didn't book anything that day. We didn't need to. We split fries and watched gulls negotiate treaties over dropped crumbs, and I felt that seawall certainty rise in me. There are so many ways to go to sea without handing anyone your compass. At home that night, I did something small that felt like ceremony. I moved my binder off the kitchen table and onto a shelf, reachable not central. In its place, I set the Coastal Wanderers notebook pages dog-eared and smudged with salty fingers. I added a line to the front, we decide. We pay as we go. We leave when we're done. Before bed, I stood at the window and looked at the porch light, the tidy lock, the familiar rug with sand that never quite leaves. Then I wrote one last note. Just for me, I am not afraid of the horizon anymore. Quirky fact, horizons never get closer, but your legs get stronger. Jogba also, your hat collection gets better. No one tells you wisdom includes the right brim. I turned off the lights. No cameras in my head, no audience in my kitchen. Just the quiet of a house that belongs to me and a calendar dotted with places I chose. Tomorrow we decide whether to chase tide pools or train schedules. Tonight, the tide kept time and I kept the key, and both of us were precisely where we belonged. Margaret Doyle's quiet life unravels when her daughter-in-law Vanessa demands she fund a $50,000 luxury cruise. Margaret refuses, and the confrontation escalates into a slap and an ultimatum to leave the house. Choosing dignity over further humiliation, Margaret retreats to her friend Helen's seaside cottage. As she regroups, Margaret discovers suspicious withdrawals from her bank account and missing financial documents. With Helen's help, she documents everything, tracing a trail through travel agencies, jewelers, and a private mailbox linked to Vanessa. Each stop adds to a growing body of evidence, photos, invoices, and witness statements that reveal a pattern of coercive financial control.
Margaret takes the findings to attorney Leonard Price, who files for an emergency protective order on her assets and exclusive possession of her home. The court grants it, and Margaret re-enters her house with a police escort documenting every change and securing the property with new locks and cameras.
The investigation deepens when bank footage confirms Vanessa making the withdrawals. Detective Alvarez recovers stolen items from a consignment shop, strengthening the legal case. In court, the evidence secures full restitution, a permanent restraining order, and a ban on Vanessa accessing Margaret's accounts or property. Freed from the constant threat, Margaret reclaims her home and peace of mind. She rebuilds her relationship with her son Colin and starts a community travel group, the Coastal Wanderers, dedicated to low-cost, self-planned adventures. Through day trips, shared planning, and clear boundaries, she redefines what freedom and companionship look like, without manipulation or financial strings. In the end, Margaret doesn't just recover what was taken, she expands her life, proving that control over her choices is the most valuable asset she owns. Her story becomes one of resilience, boundaries, and the joy of steering her own course.